And I have another hat back there. It says, Donald Trump was right about everything. And I said, no, that sounds a little too conceited, but it happens to be true, I must tell you.
Wow, we're coming in hot with Donald J. Trump's celebration rally, and isn't every one of his rallies a celebration for Donald J. Trump, following the passage of likely the only legislative accomplishment of his term? So, is it any good? Let's say reactions have been mixed. But before we get to the nitty-gritty, the boring stuff, let's bask for a little bit more in the glorious afterglow of the latest, greatest, bestest rally.
We got a lot of front row Joes here. That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you. And we have Mr. Wall. Someday I'm buying that suit, I'm telling you. I like that suit. I'll walk up one day, I'll be dressed like a wall, just like you. I think he's come to about 200 rallies, and that means you like us. And I think he's a very successful guy, too, believe it or not. He's a top accountant. Can you believe this?
Can you believe that? Schmack Camps, dressed like a wall, is probably my biggest supporter and doesn't have a low IQ. Unbelievable.
I want to thank Republican congressmen and women because what they did is incredible last night, and the Senate, the Republican Senate. We got, not with all of the things we did with the tax cuts and rebuilding our military, not one Democrat voted for us. And I think we use it in the campaign that's coming up, the midterms, because we got to beat them. But all of the things that we've given, and they wouldn't vote only because they hate Trump. But I hate them too, you know that? So it's sort of, I really do, I hate them.
Ladies and gentlemen, the president for love.
165 days into the Trump administration, America is on a winning streak like, frankly, nobody's ever seen before in the history of the presidency. They said, you know, sir, you're going to go down as one of the greatest presidents ever. I said, really? No, I said, really? I said, better than Washington? They said, yes, sir. I said, better than Honest Abe Lincoln? They said, yes, sir. I said, I like this guy that said that. That's a smart guy. He's up for a big promotion right now.
Oh, is he? That's completely unexpected. Wait, so he shoved your whole testicular shaft in his mouth and gargled with your testicles by telling you, a guy who's not fit to polish Lincoln's boots and who would almost certainly have been a pro-slavery secessionist, that you're a better leader than him, and he's getting promoted. Ah, super surprising. Definitely doesn't fit your MO.
Iran's nuclear enrichment has been obliterated. Remember when CNN said, it wasn't obliterated. It was maybe damaged or damaged badly, but obliterated is too strong a word. No, it was obliterated. That's now been proven. The Atomic Energy Commissions, everything that's been obliterated. And they were trying to demean me by saying that, but they were really demeaning those great pilots and people and mechanics that got those planes over there. And they're trying to demean me, but to me, they were demeaning them. And they got out of the plane and they said, what the hell? We hit every single target. They know better than anybody. But now that's been proven. It's CNN fake news and scammers that work for them, scam writers that work for them. But we understand it and we fight it back. And a lot of people said, sir, don't criticize it because they're beneath you. No, they're not beneath me. Nobody's beneath. You got to put it. Otherwise, people don't understand. If you don't say something about it, you got to say it. These people did one of the greatest military hits and maneuvers in the history of our country, and I want them to be appreciated for it.
Look, CNN, scam writers at CNN. What don't you understand? The great orange McNugget doesn't want you to question or investigate his military operations. End of. What do you think this is? A healthy and functioning democracy where the press keeps the citizenry informed and the government in check? No, no, you're confused. This is America. And by the way, this is America. CNN questioning military operations. What is happening to you?
This whole 2 weeks has been incredible, hasn't it? You know, when you think of all of the victories, we stopped 5 nations from going to war, and somebody else will get the Nobel Peace Prize for their writing about Donald Trump. A professor at some school that you've never heard of has received the Nobel Prize for his writing about Donald Trump and what Donald Trump did. I'll say, what about me? I don't get it, but that's one of those things. But think of it, we stopped India and Pakistan.
What the mighty fuck is he talking about? A professor who writes about Trump gets the Nobel Peace Prize. Why? Because the people read about the life of Trump and then we had peace. What the fuck? Also, just to note, the Indian Prime Minister has gone public a number of times since the buffoon started blabbering about this to emphatically deny that the US had any role in the latest cessation of hostilities between India and Pakistan. Look, it's honestly mind-numbing listening to this buffoon. We're 30 minutes in and he's barely mentioned the signature bill that he's about to sign into law because I guess there's only so much people can cheer for corporate tax cuts and Medicaid cuts. So instead, he'll keep doing this for another 40 minutes.
Machetes. A machete. You know what a machete is? You don't want to know. Does anybody watch UFC, the Great Dana White? We're going to have a UFC fight. We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this on the grounds of the White House.
He really is the master of circuses. Truly gives off those crazy Roman Emperor nostalgia vibes.
For this anniversary, I've just signed an executive order to raise entrance fees for foreign tourists while keeping prices low for Americans. And we're going to do that at the national parks.
Lol, don't worry. I don't think there's gonna be any foreign tourists. I think we've seen enough.
How's it doing? Climate change every time. If it's cold, if it's hot, if it's rainy, if it's sunny, if it's too crazy, we have climate change. But think of it. They're telling you what's going to happen in 100 years. The oceans are going to rise a quarter of an inch and everyone's going to be wiped out. No, you're going to have more oceanfront property if that happens. It's okay.
Ah, he's so fucking stupid. Enough. So with all the pomp and fanfare, the UFC White House lawn fight, saving the country from communism, yeah, definitely communist. Naming a bunch of places, something else. Perhaps it's easy to forget that his big stupid bill just passed through Congress and is just about to be signed into law by him. So, as I said, what's in it? Let's go through it as quickly as we can. The bill's flagship policy is making permanent the corporate tax cuts he implemented during his last term, which were about to expire next year. He has included some additional write-offs, like tax write-offs on tips and overtime. However, unlike his tax cuts to his corporate bodies, these ones are not permanent and are set to expire right before Trump's presidential term ends. Furthermore, as you'll see, the cuts in Medicaid and food assistance programs, a vain attempt to balance the loss of government revenue by taking more from those who have the least, are about to offset any gains by these write-offs, which again are temporary, unlike his corporate freebies. And yes, he also made permanent some good things like doubling the child tax credits, but these are not the lion's share of the cost. Which leads us to the second most important part of the bill, roughly $170 billion allocated for immigration and border-related operations, a stunning sum that would make ICE the most heavily funded law enforcement agency in the federal government. And even though they're spending $170 billion on the border, just to rub salt on the wound, they're capping the number of immigration judges at 800, despite a backlog with millions of pending cases. So to further illustrate how insane this level of spending is, an analysis by the Libertarian Cato Institute argues that even the current level of immigration enforcement spending is extreme, even without adding in the new bill, with Congress already allocating 34 billion for immigration and border enforcement in fiscal year 2025, an amount that is about 36 times the IRS's budget for tax enforcement, 21 times the firearms enforcement budget, 13 times the drug enforcement budget, and 8 times more than the FBI's. So why not dump another gazillion dollars to that budget, right? Surely there must be nothing better to spend it on. Oh, and with 46 billion allocated to border wall construction, I'm sad to report that Trump's dream will likely be fulfilled and the wall between Mexico and the US will be built. I know his supporters don't chant about it anymore because they think he's already built it, but this time he will for real. Then we have the aforementioned cuts to Medicaid and food stamps, a perfunctory gesture to balance the bill without touching their friends' bank accounts by fucking over poor people. Because, yes, say it with me, that's what right wing populists do. They get you to start foaming at the mouth over foreigners, and then when you're not looking, they fuck you over. And finally, in a move that only Elon Musk couldn't see coming, the bill slashes tax incentives for EVs and any and all forms of green energy. Congrats, Elon. Hope you enjoyed spending all those millions to get this buffoon elected just so he can fuck over your business. Truly the Da Vinci of our times. So give and take, that's what's in the bill. An almost complete and utter waste of federal money to subsidize corporations, spend money that is neither needed nor wanted on immigration enforcement, fuck over green energy because big oil is funding us, and all that for a hefty price tag of another $3.3 trillion added to the deficit, according to the Congressional Budget Office, mostly because of those permanent tax cuts. And I mean, really, for all of Trump's, let's call it uniqueness, is there anything more Republican than getting together to threaten other countries with your missiles, shit on communism, harass foreigners, and pass tax cuts for the rich? I doubt it.